Hello my friend and welcome back. My name is Hannah and today I'm going to talk about some of my favorite shades and some of my favorite palettes. So if you're curious about what I'm wearing on my face, what I'm doing in other pockets of the internet, and what I mentioned in today's video, I always have links in the description box down below, so don't forget to check them out. I'm going to go through some of my favorite palettes and I'm going to tell you which shade is my favorite and why. I kind of just want to chit chat about makeup, you know, and I do have some ground rules that I set up for myself. I did pick from palettes that were still available, whether it be on Sephora, Ulta, or on the brand's own website. And I also, I have 3 palettes at the end that I don't know if they are readily available anymore or they're technically still available, just not in the US kind of thing. So I'm going to show you the shade in the palette. I'm going to swatch it on my arm and we'll see what happens. And I don't know, I kind of want this to be, I don't know, kind of like a diary entry, if you will. Like I kind of hope to continue doing this every year just so I can see what changes I have in my own personal makeup preference and what I gravitate towards, and kind of help me when kind of shopping for eyeshadow palettes, because I know that I typically tend to lean towards anything that's like green leaning, but I don't know if I really have any green tones in this video. So let's start with the first palette, and that is the Knobla Cuties palette. This is number 5, the cute, the berries palette. I love this palette. I will reach for this palette quite often because as a whole, I love this color story. But the shade that I kind of reach for the most is this Alchemy shade right here, or Alchemy 2.0. And I don't know, I like to use it as like a lid topper or just on its own. Sometimes I will just use this in like an eyeliner, like I did my makeup like that for work for a while. I just think that it's so pretty. I don't know if you can really see it on camera, but it kind of has like a peachy base with like a pink and blue shimmer in it. It's really gorgeous. I love it so much. The next palette I want to talk about is actually the McGrath Mothership, A Diamond of the First Water. And on the inside, it's an interesting color story because it's pinks with a pop of blue, but really the shade that calls to me is, what is this called? A plum regalia? This plum regalia? Am I saying that right? Let me know in the comments down below. But I love this shade. I like to use it as like a liner. Constantly reaching for this palette for this shade specifically. And I don't know if I really have another tone like this, or I don't know if I have this tone in other palettes. So I'm nervous about hitting pan on it and not having it, because I do reach for this shade quite often. It's just like a cooler tone, kind of plummy brown. It's just really pretty. And it was hard for me to not use all of my Natasha Denona palettes in this video, but specifically the Retro palette is the palette that I love the most in my collection and that is still readily available. I reach for this palette quite often. This is my favorite palette to kind of wear to work when I'm just going out. I can dress it up, I can dress it down. The transition shades, I can go from something really light to something really dark, and I think that's why it's so easy for me to constantly be using this palette. But the shade I love the most in here is this Helio shade. And again, kind of like the Berries palette, I kind of use this as like a topper. But it's just such a pretty brown, and I don't know how to explain. It's like this coppery, pinky brown kind of shimmer shade, and it's just so gorgeous. Like, oh my gosh, look at how neutral my arm looks right now. I promise I do wear colors, but I think this one is so pretty, and I kind of will just use these two together, if I'm being honest. I kind of just always pair them together. Another mention, because I can only stick to one shade per palette, but if I could pick another one, it would be this Mod shade right here. This was like the inner corner highlight of my dreams. I was using it in every single video, but I do have another shade that I do use for that I will be mentioning later on. Let's talk about the Soulmane 2 palette. I really enjoy this palette a lot. There are a lot of tones in this palette in particular that I gravitate towards. I like to use these tones together. I like to use them individually. This yellow orangey one I love it a lot, but I will actually be pulling this blue shade, Soft Cloud. I reach for this one quite often because I do like to pair it with a lot of the blues in my collection. I will actually lay this one down and lay that blue shimmer shade from the Pat McGrath palette on top, and that's really pretty. The only downside to this is I don't know if I can get this to swatch properly. It looks better with a primer, and I don't have any primers on my arm right now. But this is what it looks like. It's just like a soft cloud blue. This is my favorite kind of tone of blue eyeshadow. Something like this or something really deep. I'm not really a fan of like the turquoise-y kind of blues. I like a true like, what is the word I'm looking for? I like a true primary blue, if you will, and the pastel version of that would be this one. This next palette, I don't know, this is one of those weird ones. I don't know if this one is available, but I think it's available on the BH website, and I think that it should be coming back as BH isn't gone. Just, I don't think you can find it in your Ulta. I went into my Ulta today actually, and I saw the BH section, and it just had some remnants of like the Doja Cat collection, like one lip gloss and like, I don't know, something else that was hanging in there. It was pretty empty. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on with BH, but I think that they're back, and they still are continuing the travel series, which makes me think that they'll restock the travel series. But this is the Lost in Los Angeles palette, and the shade I'm actually gonna talk about is this one right here, the Abbey. I do pull some other shades in here, like Malibu's a really pretty one as well, but the Abbey is the one that I gravitate towards the most. I love to use this as an inner corner highlight. It is the best white matte that I have, and I don't know, I think if I were to ever make a palette, I would definitely have a white matte in there because I use a white matte more frequently than I ever thought that I would. It kind of bothers me when I get like a black and white, or I see a black and white palette and it doesn't have like a true white matte. It's just a really nice matte shade. One of my favorite palettes of all time is the Odenzai and Angelica Nevis Hella palette. I've used this palette a lot on my channel. I've used this palette a lot outside of my channel. It just has so many great tones. I love this color story. Again, it has all the greens and all the pinks, and those are two very beloved colors in my collection. I think I have, again, so many pink palettes, so many green palettes. But the shade I actually love the most in this palette is this Soot shade. And I didn't think that I was going to care about this shade at all, but it is one of the coolest shades I have in my collection, and I'm kind of sad that this is limited edition because I just think everyone needs to have this shade in their collection. It's just so pretty, and it's transformative. So as I'm swatching it, it looks, where am I going with my swatches? I'm like losing you guys. Okay, so as you can see, it's like this plummy, purpley kind of tone on my swatch, but depending on the shade that you match it with, it shifts. So when you put it with more pink shades, it's more purple leaning, but when you put it with green shades, it's more brown leaning, and it is just my favorite deep shade to make my eyes more dramatic, you know, to put it on that outer corner, to put it in my waterline. This one, it's just, if I only ever wore one shadow ever again, it would be that one. The next palette I have is actually the Gemini II palette. I reach for my Gemini palette quite often, but I really do enjoy the Gemini II, I think, a little bit more because it does have these greens and pink tones in there, and I love these like rosy tones. The shade I'm actually going to select from this palette is this one right here, Lovesick. It is like the prettiest, like plummy red in my collection, and I love it so much. Let's see if I can swatch this properly. It's just really deep and really plummy, and I can use it, you know, in the lower lash line. I can use it in the outer corner. I can kind of just use this over the lid and like blend it out and just do like a one and done kind of shade. And it's just really pretty, and it's the kind of red that I love the most. Deep, deep, like maroony kind of red, and it is just so gorgeous. Okay, and so for the next 3 shades, I believe that these palettes are technically still available. I have 1 in question, 2 in question. Well, okay, I know this palette is still available in Russia, but it's because of what's going on in Russia currently, we can't get it in the States. I don't even know if you can get it in Europe. I don't know. But it is the Sigma inspired Chestnut Toad palette. If I had known what was going to happen, I would have bought more things when I made this order, because I love this formula so much. It's this shimmer shade right here in this corner. I don't know. It is shade 093. I think that's what it is. I think it's either 093 or 095. But I mean, you couldn't buy it anyway unless like you have access to a Russian bank. Then I think you could. But I love this shade so much. It's so pretty. Ugh. I almost feel like I'm wasting it swatching it on my arm, but it's just so pretty. It's kind of similar to that first shade from the Knobla Cutie palette. I don't know if you can really see it, but this one is actually more of like a goldy champagne kind of tone. It is really, really pretty. This next palette is a BH palette, but I don't know if they're bringing this one back. I know that one of the palettes is still available on their website, but this was for the, what are we, in 2020? This is for the 2021 like monthly release, and it is the Opal palette. They released a different birthstone every month, and I do love the blue in here. This is one of my favorite. I think it kind of performs better than the Odin's Eye blue, but I'm actually going to talk about this pink shade in here, this pastel pink. It is one of my favorite pastel pinks in my collection. This is kind of like what I wished the Natasha Denona pastel palette was supposed to be. It's just unfortunate that the pink tone in that palette doesn't pop as much. Well, does it even pop on my arm? It's kind of hard to tell. I didn't put a primer on this arm before I started swatching, but it is just like the prettiest like Barbie pink. And I love this shade. And then the last shade that I'm going to be talking about is from the ABH Subculture palette. I don't know if this is available. Like, I don't know at all. Although I have a feeling that it is, but then I also feel like it's not. But I'm just going to throw it out there anyway because I feel like a lot of indie brands recreate the shade specifically. But this electric shade, I don't know, it is so pretty, and I will reach right into this palette for this shade on its own because it's just so gorgeous. And because I love greens and browns, like this is it. And I guess looking at it, it's kind of like the Sigil inspired shade, but it has more of like a green shift to it. Wow, I am just full of a lot of similar shades. I'll insert B-roll footage here of my arm so you can see the tones. I'm actually quite impressed by what I'm seeing. It seems like I love really dark tones and then a pop of pastel, and then I love a multifunctional shimmer. I wouldn't even say that these are necessarily like duochromes, but they kind of are shifty like a duochrome. I guess those are my favorite kind of like metallic shimmer shade. I've been on a no buy, low buy, so I haven't really been buying any new palettes. I've been trying to really use what I have in my collection, and this just kind of shows me that I'm a neutral with a pop of color. But then when I look at my YouTube videos, I don't see that. So maybe this is just a little bit conflicting. I don't know. Maybe I'm just kind of calling out my work self and how I do my makeup at work. I don't know. But let me know in the comments down below which shades were your favorite. Do we have similar favorite palettes that we like? And which shade would you pick instead? And if you liked hanging out with me today and you would like to see more, make sure you go down below and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.